Last minute prep. Does everybody have something in hand?
In a manner of speaking.
Good enough. Not going to ask. We'll find out later. Okay. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Accidental Survivors. This is Fraser.
This is Rob.
This is Chris.
And this is Todd, making his 17th appearance.
Are you counting them?
So am I.
Very cool.
I figured by my 20th I get a free stamp.
You do, but it's just a little piece of Chris's nose gunk.
Oh, that's in the mail to the new address.
That's right. A housewarming gift.
That's right. From me to you, buddy.
Oh, well, I'll be living in the country, so it's not going to be the grossest thing I'm going to see, I'm sure.
Yeah, that is true.
You haven't seen it yet.
That is also true. Well, let's start with the drink check. Chris is first on my left on the screen, so why don't you begin, Chris?
I have a lovely Boddington's Pub Ale.
No, excellent.
Haven't had one of these for a while, so I was craving them.
And
Boddington's. Yeah, that's a name I haven't heard in a while.
Oh yeah, it's delicious. Succulent. Sweet. Oh yeah.
was it everything you had imagined?
It is everything I remember.
That's awesome.
And
Rob,
what do you
what you
have?
got?
Oh, we're doing it that way.
Yep. Me? My turn?
Yeah, go.
Actually, I have a caramel macchiato from Starbucks.
Oh well.
La di da.
Someone got a raise.
And someone
Yes.
will be awake for the entire hour.
No, it's a decaf. It's a decaf.
Someone will be asleep in about 5 minutes.
It is delish though. I haven't had one of these in a long time actually.
Those are good.
Oh, geez, he's been at Starbucks too much. He said delish.
Oh, God. Oh, God!
No, if this was like a half calf, half decaf, 1% non-fat, if I went on and on and on, then you'd know.
Half calf decaf espresso.
This is a tall caramel macchiato. I worked at Starbucks years and years and years ago when I was in college, and it was my favorite drink then. And it still is.
Memories. Todd, what have you got?
I'm just drinking good old-fashioned decaf coffee that just came out of my ordinary coffee machine right here in my own kitchen.
Very nice.
So I tried to embellish it a little bit so that it seems somewhat fancy, other
No,
than
you
like,
need
open
to
up a
work
can
on
of
that.
Maxwell House and I poured it in my machine.
No, you need to work on that some more.
Yeah, you know what? Maybe that's what I'll do for my prep next time. Is I'll prep whatever kind of bullshit level of coffee I'm gonna say, even though just to emphasize the fact.
Hey, take it down a notch there, buddy. Maybe you need to switch to decaf.
Yeah. Walk that back just a little bit.
That's right.
All right, well, I myself have got an Innocent Gun, but it is the Rare Oak Pale Ale.
Oh, interesting. I was going
Now,
to pick.
are you saying that the name of it is a rare oak pale ale, or is it a
Correct.
rare oak pale
Nope.
ale?
The name is a Rare Oak Pale Ale.
Okay.
That must be a newer one. I haven't seen that one around.
Well, that kind of makes sense.
Or is that? No, wait. Is that the one with the blue writing?
It's a green label. It's a seasonal edition.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I have seen. I have-
Didn't you sign up, because we're unofficial representatives, didn't you sign up for the beta?
Yeah.
Can you imagine? That'd be so awesome.
Beta testers for Innocent Gun.
I was at the liquor store today. and I
Actually,
was,
hang on. Sorry, Fraser, that could really go both ways.
That
It could be really good. It could also be very, very bad. Anyways, go ahead.
I'd be willing to take the risk. Go on, Chris.
I was going to say I was at the liquor store tonight getting my Boddingtons, and I was pleased to see that the rum cask is like the regular price was $2 something now, and then they had all the other ones. So they had the Irish whiskey cask and the Scottish whiskey cask, which is delicious.
Yes.
They were all like $3 something. So the rum cask is like normal beer. Wow, it's
Right.
still-
It's becoming their standard. I think we have changed their mind. It's us,
It's true.
particularly,
Yes.
that have got Innocent Gun to accept that rum cask is in fact the best thing ever in the world.
Yeah.
So it's become their standard.
And we are officially responsible for getting it to the rest of North America because
That
of
is
us.
correct.
Yep.
Yes, us.
Us.
Are you listening to this, Innocent Gun? Us. We need to be rewarded.
Even to the far reaches of South America. I would hesitate to say. I would not hesitate to say. I should say. That's a lot of saying and hesitating, or not hesitating, as the case may be.
I'm getting confused.
Let me just say, if I was to hesitate about saying, it wouldn't be saying that we were responsible for getting into South America, which may or may not be the case. I hesitate to say. I do not hesitate.
May or may not be a continent. All right. Hey, okay, so I called Joel here today for a purpose, to record a podcast.
You're pregnant. Oh, record a podcast.
The Joker has struck at Gotham again.
He has. Pick up the red phone, quick.
Call Chief. What's his nuts?
That's the new guy. What's his nuts? Is that a ethnic name?
I thought my name was shitty.
I can't remember the police chiefs. Not Gordon.
Not the
Gordon. The Irish.
The guy on the TV show.
Yeah.
Chief TV show.
Oh, he's normally a comedian guy. That guy? No, he's the mayor. Sorry.
No, not on Gotham. On the old school Batman.
Oh, the old Irish. Yeah.
Keith O'Hara.
O'Hara. Boom.
Oh yes.
Batman's on the line again.
There's actually a really interesting documentary about Adam West that's on Netflix right now that I watched.
I noticed that. Yeah, I noticed it. I haven't seen it, but I did notice the icon for it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. His life between the end of Batman and then his kind of resurgence as like a voice actor and cameo stuff like that. It was really kind of sad, but it's a really interesting documentary. If you're interested at all in Adam West, I would highly recommend it. I found it a very good documentary. It's a little bit of a hagiography. Like I think the person is an unabashed fan, so it's not necessarily a warts and all biography, but it is very interesting. It does go into some of the dark times that happened after the TV series.
Right. It is. You can find it under Star. It's called Starring Adam West.
Yeah, that's it. Yep. It's good.
Good.
Which is interesting because the idea for this podcast came from a blog article that Todd wrote about movies and role-playing games, which I really want to talk about because I take a huge amount of inspiration from movies. I mean, Never to the Overdrive really is a kind of a love letter to the wuxia warfu genre. So I just wanted to discuss that because I thought it'd be pretty cool. So Todd, why don't you not necessarily, read the article for us, but walk us through some of the ideas that you were postulating in that.
Well, I'm a lot like you in the sense that I get a lot of inspiration from movies as well because, me no read no books too good. But I mean, I had just finished watching the movie John Wick, and it was exactly what I was hoping for. But as an assassin film, this kind of got me thinking back to my game Killshot, and there was a lot of elements from John Wick.
Whoa. Any award-winning Killshot?
Any award-winning Killshot, yes. And then this is the part where there's a little sparkle in my teeth as I smile. So, there was a couple of elements, but I mean, it really kind of got me thinking of the difference in styles of presentation because there's another film that I like to call Killshot the movie, and that's Killer Elite with Jason Statham and Robert De Niro. And so it just kind of got me thinking about how there's two completely different ways to approach the same material, and it's not something that's mechanic in nature or anything like that. It's just basically just on how you actually approach it during the game and how you describe scenes and actions and outcomes and all this other kind of stuff. So I mean, it was really just more for myself about taking different styles from movies, where that's one of those things where that's more of the director's influence. You could read the two scripts and they come across as very much the same, but it's in how the director actually applies how they want it to be, whether or not they want it to be harsh and gritty, or they want it to be very stylish, with a kind of a flow to it or anything like that. And it's appropriate too because the GM in Killshot is known as the director. So that was more of my approach with it. But at the same time too, yeah, I mean, for me, movies are a huge influence a lot of my design work comes from trying to replicate the kind of action sequences that you see in movies, not so much of taking like, a Fate or Cortex Plus and trying to create a game that plays on the relationship between characters, or take, like trying to emulate some other kind of genre from fiction, like, Dungeons and Dragons or, like Conan or anything else like that. For me, it's about trying to replicate what you see in movies. So movies are a huge influence for me in my games, how I run them and how I create them.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting because the article was really almost a retrospect, because when Killshot was written, neither of those movies had come out yet, if I remember correctly. That way movies can be a huge influence on how you run a game. For Nefertiti Overdrive, it was really about the like, as you said, the visuals of the movie. Nefertiti Overdrive didn't really go into a lot of the character dimensions and literary aspects of wuxia, as opposed to just the visuals of Warfu and the excitement that those actions bring. And it was something that I wanted to really put directly into the mechanics, so it could not be avoided. It's an integral part of the game. And Sword Noir, while it was very much about hard-boiled detective fiction, I mean, some of that is also, like, Out of the Past, the movie with Robert Mitchum and Kirk Douglas, was also a huge influence. It's one of my favorite film noirs. So I mean, like, that was also getting the atmosphere of those styles of movies into the game was also really important. So I think, again, it's interesting to me because movies can be a huge influence on how we design our games, but it also then becomes a huge influence in how we run them or what players want out of them. Okay, well, that was the show. So good
night. So when you're using it as a what was I going to say? So when you picture a way a certain scene plays out in your mind, how do you translate that to the game at the table? Because, so if you take, I don't know, a big epic sort of fight scene where you have mobs of guys, right? They happen very fluently in the movies.
Yeah.
Already know the guys. They're going to win. They might take the odd, cut and scratch along the way. But if you translate that into a game, often the mechanics, unless that game is particularly tailored to that style of play, the mechanics will often get in the way of making the PC shine in the same fashion that they would in the movies.
But I don't agree with that. And again, I'm looking at specifically games I know really well, and I do not know Warhammer well, so I could be very wrong with how Warhammer works. But in the actual rules of D&D, for example, and certainly in the rules of 5e, there's nothing in there that says how the player can narrate their hit.
No. From the player side, the difference would be that it's all about usually the scales of the combat. D&D does, fairly evenly matched combats very well.
Mm-hmm.
It's when you start to add mobs that you run into problems. So if you're doing kind of 13th Warrior with D&D, there's more of a balance. If you're doing, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a more over-the-top sort of fantasy movie, like you would have in Asian cinema where you have like one guy taking on 10. In D&D, the one guy, unless he's that much overpowered, but if you're sort of using core D&D, you're not going to have such power disparity based on how the rules say you should set up encounters. You can always do your own thing, so don't get me wrong, you could make it happen. But even in D&D, you take one guy against 30 goblins, even if he's, sixth level and their first level or 10th level, odds are he could very easily get beat up just with the whole, rolling a 20.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. I know that's something I've been thinking about a lot recently with my work on screenplay. And one of the things that really kind of popped in my head were my memories of playing Star Wars D20, where they had, health and vitality. And the couple of times when I played it, the one thing that I couldn't shake was that, okay, so, Greedo shoots at you with a blaster, and when you know it, this one time is when he hits, and it's you. And, so you lose these points of vitality. It's like, oh, okay, so I've been hit and I took damage. Well, no, actually, it was like the act of dodging the blast that actually kind of wore you out, so to speak. I couldn't help but feel that, that system was set up in a way that I constantly felt like I was constantly getting hit with blasters and laser swords and everything all the time, and it really took me away from that illusion of being in the Star Wars universe, because in that one, getting hit by a laser blaster is like serious hardcore business. Like the way it was written in the original adaptation, the novel adaptation, where they're like these giant blistering wounds. I mean, like the original version of the old screenplay was like really graphic in many ways. And I don't know. So yeah, I agree with you, Chris. Like there can be certain mechanics that do take you away from certain genres that you might be trying to emulate. So in some cases, mechanics can have a huge influence over that. So that's why for me, it's more so I just try and borrow from a certain kind of, the style and the tone, and a lot of times it's more so just in how you present the cities, other characters. We all went through our Quentin Tarantino phase where, like everyone was a bunch of, like slick talking, like mofos, as he tries to clean up his language now. But when it comes to combat, yeah, I know that's something that I've always kind of struggled with myself, because, yeah, I like the idea of having a game where you can take on, 20 guys at the same time, but not all systems are always able to handle that. And things like initiative especially, but damage really kind of breaks from that illusion of trying to recreate things from your favorite movies. I find it can make a huge difference, almost like a deal breaker.
Well, part of the problem is that a lot of people, I mean, D&D and Star Wars D20 explained what it was, but that didn't fit with how people perceived it. So, I mean, that's also a perception problem. Like the rules fit where you're not actually being hit by the laser. Yes, the roll was a success, but that success didn't actually mean that you got hit by the laser. But then the way that the GM says it and the way that you perceive it. So, I mean, that's not necessarily a rules problem per se, as much as a perception problem. As to taking how you turn a really fluid action scene against multiple opponents, like, I mean, a good example for me would be the opening of The Grandmaster. If you've seen the movie The Grandmaster, a recent movie by Wong Kar-wai, which has Yuan Wu-ping as the choreographer, the same guy that did Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and Matrix. There's an opening scene where the Tony Leung, I think it is, who plays the main character, takes on like 10, 15 guys, and of course beats them.
Right.
If the game isn't set up to emulate that, you are going to have a problem. Like, there's no way to get around that. There are some games that are built to emulate that, and there are some games that are not. If that's what you want in your game, you need to find a game that emulates that. And you can hack games to do whatever you want. I mean, I think we've all done that. Everyone on this podcast has done that. And that's usually the first step, something that moves on to game design, is hacking existing games. So you can make any game do that. You can also just accept certain narratives. There was, I think it was 4E that had the swarm rule, where basically a swarm acted like one monster. There's that, right? Like, so if you're fighting, which is kind of how Nefertiti Overdrive does it, because everything's a challenge, right? So if you're fighting 10 guys, you might have, it's one challenge, or like in D&D terms, it's one monster. And as you're hitting guys and everything, as you're taking hit points off or whatever, you can narrate about the guys getting knocked down or like whatever. So sure, you can hack games to make it do what you want, but it's much better to just choose a game that does that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, I also find too a lot of it just comes down into adding little tricks into it. So for example, going with Grandmaster, and I've really only seen that opening sequence you just talked about. There's a lot of slow motion in that, as there is with quite a few certain films. So that's something that I'd like to do in certain fight scenes, especially too when there's a critical. is to just describe how all of a sudden the rain starts to fall at half speed, and as the person falls back for the next 5 minutes, those kinds of things. They're just a lot of times they're just elements that you can just add narratively to just back up how the dice have been rolled or what's been provided before. So sometimes even just a little trick like that can do it. But yeah, I mean, quite a few times you just have to take some liberties with things unless you find a system that was made for it, or you've done some hacking to make it work. Yeah, exactly.
And I think so that's a really good example. The slow mo. Wong Kar-wai is an amazing visualist. So it's such, there's a lot of scenes that are really beautiful. And there's nothing stopping a player even in D&D or in GURPS or whatever from narrating it like that. I mean, unless you've got a jerk-off GM who's like, well, that's not what the rules say. Whatever. Let the guy have fun. Let him narrate what he wants. It doesn't change anything in the mechanics. And you can get a lot more player investment if you allow them to do that. Another thing for me from movies is like auditory cues. And I'm thinking, like, for example, for a game like Killshot, where you're doing guns and everything, there's a lot of scenes, it's probably horribly overused by now, but with the shell casing hitting the ground, right? And that's the only thing you can hear, right? And sometimes that can be really cool. And again, that can be part of the description. Even if the person misses, like if they're just unloading and they can just talk about the sound of the shell casings hitting the ground as if that's all they can hear, and just little things like that, because people that watch action movies, we all know exactly what you're talking about when you mention that, because it's in so many action movies. Again, I'm not going to say it's horribly overused, because sometimes it can be done well, kind of like Dubs with John Woo. Sometimes it's done well, sometimes it's just ridiculous. So there's things like that as well. And almost all this stuff, when you're talking about movies, you can mechanically emulate them as well. And again, like Nefertiti Overdrive is very much about emulating specific motion pictures, and Killshot, there's a lot of inspiration from movies and stuff. So I mean, you can totally mechanically emulate it as well. And if that's your thing, there's lots of games out there that can do that. Beer.
Coffee. Just trying to finish off before it gets too cold.
Another one interesting that we're doing now with screenplay is High Plains Samurai, which to me is Chris, you know Warrior's Way, right?
Oh yeah.
The movie? Yeah.
Yeah.
To me, High Plains Samurai is very much a mix of The Good, the Bad, the Weird, Warrior's Way, and like basically any Sergio Leone spaghetti western. Like
right.
For me, High Plains Samurai is all about movies. Like probably because I don't read cowboy comics and I don't read western novels or anything. So all of my inspiration, all of my ideas for that kind of genre do come from movies.
Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, the best. I don't know if it's the best movies emulate well-written books, or the best books seem to emulate the movies when it comes to the Western genre. But I find that the good ones are very. It's not like, you read fantasy, and there's a million types of fantasy, and a lot less variety in movies.
Yep.
Because all the good fantasy movies seem to, there's a certain similarity to them. In westerns, though, a good western, regardless if it's a book, a comic, or a movie, they all are pretty much the same. And I don't mean that as a knock against the genre. It's just that and I don't know why, but there's a certain element, and I can't exactly place my finger on it, that makes a good western. Whereas fantasy, you can have a lot more variety. And maybe it's because it's fantasy, so you can kind of throw whatever you want into it. But westerns all seem like the ones that work are all kind of that one guy against the world.
Or Silverado, where you've got a bunch of guys against the world.
Or a bunch of guys against the world. But there's usually even when there's like the not quite good guy, it's usually fairly obvious that he's still the good guy.
Right.
Where, I don't know, there's a certain cut and dryness to a western that's very, it's hard to, when you've read one, I guess is kind of the worst way to say it. but you can tell because you read a Western and it clicks when it works. And same with a good Western movie, because there's a lot of Western movies that are just terrible, but all the ones that work, and you know, you can easily point out all the Clint Eastwood movies, but there's others like 3:10 to Yuma, True Grit. There's many. What was the other one I was thinking? It was Liam Neeson. Anyways, doesn't matter. But they all...
Seraphim Falls?
Yeah, Seraphim Falls. They're all fantastic Westerns, and and they're not all spaghetti Westerns.
No. Yeah.
But there's a certain... I don't know. They all have this sort of... You could kind of like draw a line down and look at sort of a scatter chart, and those ones would all be kind of on the line. And it's... I don't know. I'm not really sure what I'm saying, but you can just tell. You can just tell. Like... A good Western is a good Western, and they're all, there's a very strong similarity between all the good Westerns.
And I think that just as the Japanese adapted the Western to the samurai movie and then got adapted back, I think that Westerns have a lot to help inspire, especially fantasy role-playing games. Like, again, I don't think I've played, way back in high school, I designed a Western role-playing game. It was pathetic, but anyways, I haven't played them. But you could easily adapt, like 3:10 to Yuma, or the Magnificent Seven from the Seven Samurai, or the Silverado into fantasy, like super easy.
Well, and you mentioned samurai movies. Samurai movies are fairly similar to Westerns. Like, there's sort of that type of samurai movie that just works.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at all the ones that kind of click together, and there's a big similarity with all of them.
And I mean, there are some that kind of work outside of the Western tropes, and I'm thinking of like 13 Assassins. Isn't really much. It doesn't have a lot in common with the Westerns, but I mean, Akira Kurosawa was either doing Macbeth or he was doing Westerns. I mean, like Seven Samurai and Yojimbo and Sanjuro, those are all Westerns, right?
Right, yeah.
But then you get like Ran and Kagemusha, and those are Shakespearean kind of things. But again, like you said, when you take a lot of the samurai movies, it's the same thing as the Westerns, and you can see the same tropes that are being played there. And again, those port really easily into role-playing games. I mentioned fantasy, but it works for sci-fi as well, right?
Yeah. Well, it's a strong... I think maybe one of the key reasons is when you have a Western, you don't have all the other stuff. You've got guys, you've got guns, you've got horses, stagecoats, blah, blah, blah. But you can't start throwing a lot of stuff into it and because there's going to be a level where it's no longer a Western.
Would you say that Firefly is a Western?
The storylines are definitely Western themed, and you could easily say it's a Western in space. But the point I was trying to get to with a Western is you really have to nail the story to make it a good movie. The characters have to be very interesting. The story has to kind of fit together, because you can't throw like really, really big, awesome, extravagant special effects and monsters and creatures and all that, because they just don't exist in that genre. As soon as you do that, it's not really a Western anymore. And Firefly certainly did that, because yes, they had sort of like they had a bigger sort of, I don't know, palette sandbox to play in. But again, they kept it very much in the Western trope, where they weren't throwing in like a lot of extravagance and special effects in that. It was very much down to the story.
Yeah, but again, I mean, that you can apply that to noir, you can apply that to procedural. Like, there's a lot of things that require a good story and good characters to work, because they can't throw in fantastic elements.
Yeah,
and
it's
I mean,
not just Westerns, but
yeah. And Firefly also played with a few other genres as well. I mean, I'm thinking of like the heist genre. They did the one, I can't remember the title of it, but where Simon had to
Train Job.
I'm sorry?
Train Job.
Train Job.
Well, the Train Job is very much a Western.
The Simon one was the one where they were breaking into the hospital.
Into the hospital.
Right, yeah, that one. That's a heist, right? Like the Train Job was very much a Western. It was a train robbery, right? Mm-hmm. Which is a little bit of a heist as well, but it was I mean, just choosing a train really kind of linked it to Westerns. But the one where they actually went into one of the core
that was Ariel.
Yeah, I totally believe you. But
no, you can believe Google, actually.
Okay, thank you, Google. I'm calling Rob Google from now on.
The Google.
The Googles.
The Rob bot. But yeah,
So
I
we
mean,
kind of got off on a bit about westerns specifically there. Are we talking about westerns in this episode, or was it something else?
Just movies in general.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
something I was going to add on to this was just when it comes to westerns, and I think one of the reasons why they work so well, and you can actually take westerns and apply them to different genres, is westerns to me have always been about morality. It doesn't matter what state they're located in, like or they could be in Mexico, or they could actually be translated into samurai films. But to me, a western's always about morality. It's always about the one lone figure fighting against the forces of evil that overwhelm him, and whether or not that person, like that fight is blurred or that fight is absolute. But so many other genres, that you guys just mentioned, the procedural, the heist, and everything else, fantasy and sci-fi. To me, those things, they're not as character-driven. They're a lot of times they're setting-driven. Or they're very kind of step by step. With the heist, like you pretty much have like your step by step procedure on how it's supposed to be done. So I find that's one of the biggest difference with westerns, and yeah, that's one of the things that I like about working with. I've never really been a huge western fan, but from like a gaming element, I just kind of feel like it gives me a lot more room to work with.
yeah. I mean, and the frontier. I mean, the frontier is integral to Western as a genre, and not necessarily when you take it out of the frontier, then you get samurai movies, or you can get noir and stuff like that.
Yeah. The only other one that I would say, and this is I think where I'm kind of going with this, is that you could also say that shows like The Walking Dead, post-apocalyptic, have a lot in common with westerns because it's about morality. Post-apocalyptic, it's about maintaining whatever level of humanity you have left in a world that would spit you up and chew you out. And those are genres that I find really fascinating, and especially too from a role-playing standpoint, because then it's something where it's like it's really clear, it's really defined, it gives you a lot to work with. So many other genres, you really have to play with like the style and tone, and whether or not it's like fast-paced action, or it's like slick and dark, or anything like that, simply because there is not a lot that the genre, I find, gives you on its own. If you're playing a western, it's almost like clear from the moment you start to. You don't even have to tell people it's a western. 5 minutes in, you can give people that impression without even telling them where they are, what they see, or anything like that. Whereas with other ones, like fantasy and sci-fi especially, you have to tell them where they are, and location and history and everything else like that. So, I find in those genres you have to really borrow different themes and moods from different directors and movies, because otherwise I find that they don't really work too well on their own.
I could vehemently disagree, but I won't, so I'll take us off on a huge tangent. I mean, like, yes, the post-apocalyptic works very much as Western because, again, it's the frontier. The frontier is a place without law, and as you're talking about the morality play, one of the huge parts of the Western is bringing order, not necessarily law, but bringing order to a disordered universe, and that is also why it works in science fiction and in Firefly, which is the same thing. One of the things that Mal is trying to do is maintain order, and I'm not talking about maintain order in the fascist sense, but he's trying to create a microcosm of serenity within serenity by instilling order.
I think the other strong key point is that in a Western, the moral choices are very clear cut. The good guys will not deviate, or whatever your moral code is, they won't deviate in a Western. Whereas in Walking Dead, there's a grayness, and because it's a story, you can kind of tell where the characters are going to go. Just because, all right, especially in the TV show, I mean, you know who the good guys are. But very often, the good guys are acting terribly for survival. And moral choice doesn't always play as prevalent a role as just the need to survive. So I think there is a difference there. It's kind of a fine line, but it is noticeable especially in in Walking Dead in particular, because they do some horrible things. And yeah, they're always portrayed as that those are the other bad guys, but at the same time, I mean, they've killed people, they've done whatever they've done to kind of drag out. They've cold-bloodedly just killed some people because they didn't want to take the chance. In Western, you wouldn't really have that happen.
True.
I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of spaghetti westerns that where in fact, in a lot of Sergio Leone movies, there's a really questionable morality, and I'm thinking, and it's not a Sergio Leone movie, but it's a Clint Eastwood, Hang 'em High. What's the one where he comes back as a ghost?
Pale
Yeah, Pale Rider.
No, not Pale Rider.
Well, that one it's kind of implied, but not really given.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. What is that one?
There's a. Yeah, he's Lynch, and he comes back, and they choose him as the sheriff, and
That's
he ends
Hang 'em
up.
High.
Is that Hang 'em High? Is that the one?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Then that's what I'm thinking of. Yeah, where he gains revenge on the town, and
right.
It's a lot of the stuff that he does is really questionable.
Oh yeah, but he's not the good guy. He's the good guy in the sense that he's the protagonist, but but I mean, he's a horrible person in that movie.
Right, but that's my point.
But the thing is, he never deviates from his morals.
What are his morals then?
To kill the town.
That's not very moral.
I'm not saying he's got high morals. I'm just saying that's his.
But that's not even a moral. That's a mission.
That's his character or whatever. He has no real morals in the show. He's just,
right. That's kind of my point.
Right.
But in any case, all of these things are applicable to role-playing games.
Let's just spin the wheels, boys. Let's just spin the wheels.
No, and I think one of the reasons why we're dwelling so much on the Western is, again, it is something that's super applicable, especially to modern role-playing games. I mean, when D&D 4 came out, or it might have been in 3, where they tried to explicitly talk about the points of light. Again, you're talking about a frontier mentality, and you're trying to place order into disorder. And again, the Western is perfect for that. That's kind of exactly the core of it. And it itself brought in a lot of tropes from earlier literature, especially the knight-errant literature. That is a huge regular trope within Westerns, and it takes the knight-errant, something that has gone back to very early Arthurian legends, like in the 10th and 11th century, and brought it forward to 19th century America, and that is also another reason why it can be so applicable into fantasy role-playing games specifically, but almost anything. And being a fan of Fallout New Vegas, I totally love the idea of overlaying Westerns on post-apocalypse or just about anything else.
Mm-hmm. But is it the genre is it the visuals that you appreciate, or is it the actual story? Because I don't find that the Fallout Las Vegas,
No, it's not. It's noir.
It's noir.
Fallout Vegas starts noir and then goes into epic, I don't know what, warfare or whatever, like political intrigue, anything.
Right.
But the trappings, the six-shooters and the dusters and the cowboy hats and all that.
Yeah, okay.
I find that very appealing in that. And again, whereas Fallout New Vegas takes the aesthetics, the visual aesthetics of the Western and applies it. The Samurai movie took the themes of the Western and applied it to something totally different. And again, that's why I think it is so applicable to role-playing games. And again, this is another thing that movies do. So Nefertiti Overdrive, yes, it was very much about the visuals of movies. But generally, another one of the things that and I say we because I've seen this a lot, another thing that we take from movies are plots. A lot of, I can't tell you how many times I've either played an Assault on Precinct 13 or a 13 Warrior.
Right.
Somebody taking the tropes, or Seven Samurai, somebody taking the tropes from those movies, and those were all one-shots, right? They're not really campaigns. They're kind of one-shots. But even, there's so many times in high school we had a Krull campaign with that the monsters move, the beasts moving castle and everything. It's so rich of ideas in the movies that we see, and I think we've become very much a visual culture as well. That it's also much easier to transport. It's much more likely that everybody in your group has seen a movie than everybody in your group has read a specific book, especially if it's not a huge, long, epic fantasy book.
Yeah, it's a nice little shorthand to be able to see. Well, and especially too, I think another thing that a lot of people borrow from are characters, or sometimes too even actors, because it's a really nice shorthand. You know, if you're trying to describe a character, and it just suddenly dawns on you as like, you know, well, remember Christopher Walken from True Romance? Yeah, that guy. That's who you see across the table.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's just one of those things where everyone's like, okay, yep, done, I'm right there, and you all see the exact same thing because it's a visual medium, and even though we're imagining the situations, you know, we're all imagining it's a little movie that's playing in our minds. No one, you know, that I can think of is actually like, you know, typing out the text in their mind as the game is going on. I mean, that actually starting to sound like an awesome way to imagine things, but you know, but for the most part, yeah, everything we picture is, you know, in our, you know, very visual. So movies are a perfect shorthand for that kind of thing because we all have seen the same thing. We might translate it differently, but it's looked the same to us.
Yeah, exactly. There's interpretation of the intent and the motivation and character arcs and stuff like that in movies. There's very little. You can't really say no that he didn't wear a black jacket. Well, no, it is a black jacket. Look, there it is. So there's that clarity. Also, if you're talking about inspiration from novels or short stories or history or anything like that, you don't have the visuals. A lot of times you are using your imagination anyways when you're reading a book. So there's no shorthand there for you. I mean, that's not to say you can't take ideas from books, because of course they do. We all do. But the visual that we're talking about, like my character looks like, it's pretty tough to say my character looks like Aragorn from the book Lord of the Rings, because I don't think any two people see the same guy. But you can say my character looks like Viggo Mortensen playing Aragorn in the movie Fellowship of the Ring, and then boom, we're all seeing exactly the same thing.
Right. Yeah, it's a good common denominator.
And I mean, this may also just be because I'm a huge fan of movies. So I mean, they're easy. They're 2 hours of your life instead of, like, depending on how big of a book is. There's very few books you can go through in 2 hours. There are some, but they're a lot faster. So you've probably ended up seeing a lot more movies, and you've absorbed a lot of the ideas, the dialogue, the tropes, the sounds. I mean, even when you're trying to say what a character sounds like, what a character talks like, you're probably copying things that you've heard from movies or TV, as opposed to something you heard on radio, and certainly not something that you've read. So there's so much that comes from movies that are so applicable to role-playing games. Now, just out of interest, can you think of the best time you've either played in or run something that was adapted from a movie?
Ghostbusters.
Yeah? Go.
Yep. Two or 3 years ago, at GriffCon, so the small game convention at the University of Guelph.
Yep.
A friend of the podcast, Chris Engler, ran a Fate Ghostbusters game. Fate? No, not Fate. I'm looking at it right now, and I can't see it from where I'm sitting. Hang on a second.
Primetime Adventures?
Rob needs glasses.
Savage Worlds.
Oh, okay.
Ah, okay.
What did you say, Chris?
Primetime Adventures?
No.
He just wants you to repeat it so we can say no.
No, as soon as he said, yeah, it was Angler, of course it was Savage Worlds.
Savage Worlds.
Yeah.
Now, we didn't play, Egon Spengler and crew. We played a new breed, I think a chapter, like a chapter somewhere else outside of New York. Just basically, so it was based on the movie. Mm-hmm. But with new Ghostbuster characters, and had an absolute blast. Now, all he took from the movie was just the sort of setting, the idea, the technology, the backstory. Everyone's seen Ghostbusters. If you haven't seen Ghostbusters, you get the same look as when you say, "Who are the Beatles?" or "I've never seen Star Wars."
So you're Captain America.
Yeah. So yeah, everyone's familiar, as you were saying. It's a common base. So everyone's familiar with the whole setting. It allowed us to get into that sort of silly level that Ghostbusters is at.
Whoa. Silly. I always thought it was a documentary.
And we've gotten to the core of Chris's problem.
Exactly.
Well, the drinking is the core. And everything else is
That's what makes me special.
Yeah, but it was a ton of fun because everyone sort of came to the table with, whenever you say we're going to play Ghostbusters, everyone gets it. Everyone gets the level that the game is going to be at, as far as, silliness is a good thing, because everyone, when you're coming into a game, everyone really should be at the same level. If you've got some people who want to be total goof-offs and some people who want to be really, take it quite seriously, then you're going to have problems.
Yeah.
You're going to have a bad time. But if everyone comes in with that same level of understanding, okay, we're playing Ghostbusters, everyone understands, the setting and the type of game it's going to be. It was a big help. Plus, it allows you to have some fun with playing around with technology. Same kind of idea. If you're a big Star Trek fan or a big Star Wars fan, and you've seen the movies or you've read the books and you have all this sort of expanded knowledge, it allows you to come in and talk the talk and like playing Star Trek. A Star Trek, and you can go in and make up all the Star Trek technobabble, and it's a lot of fun, and people get into it because they understand where you're coming from.
Did you guys have pre-gens, or did you make your own?
Oh gosh, we probably had pre-gens. I don't recall.
Okay.
We probably had pre-gens simply because it was a con game.
That's true. Yeah, good point.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. That sounds awesome.
And I don't know whether you've played a game with Engler before. He pulls out all the stops, and he has a lot of fun running the game and setting things up. So we had all sorts of little props and little, things to put on the table, and it was a lot of fun. People getting slimed, gatekeepers, keymasters, the whole 9 yards.
Sigourney Weaver.
No.
Oh, well, need to work on that. Anybody else?
No.
Yeah, for me, actually, The Matrix, by far. I mean, when I first started working on the optional system, the powered kill shot, I was actually building a Matrix game, and some of the early playtests that we did with that, it was basically. We did it with a couple of pre-gen characters, but then I found it was actually more fun when everyone started going in their own direction, because one of the unfortunate things that would happen is you start getting into this debate of at what point did the Matrix trilogy begin to suck. So we basically just kind of established a ground rule of, okay, we all agree the first one was awesome, so why don't we just work from there and then just go off in whatever direction we see fit. But once again, that was a case of, you could just go with this wild and crazy action, but something about it seemed to make sense. And that was, for me, one of the things that I loved about the Matrix films, was that finally, for the first time, there was a reason why somebody knew that someone was rushing up from behind them, but didn't have to see them coming, without all of a sudden going to this extreme close shot of their ear as it wiggles to hear the sound of the person's footsteps approaching. It was like, well, he doesn't actually see him, but it's like, he acknowledges the code as this intruder is approaching.
And you can blame that. You can blame that on the audience, having to see stuff like that with the ear wiggle.
Yeah. Well, it was one of those things.
It's just the general feeling that people aren't smart enough to be able to think for themselves to say, he must have sensed him in some other way.
Well, and it was clever the first couple of times when it was done. It's like, oh, that's a neat little trick that they do. But yeah, then it's one of those things where it just seems to happen again and again. But, when you look at a lot of fight sequences, especially during the 80s when, like the ass kicker range of one guy taking on an entire army, thank you, Arnold Schwarzenegger. this kind of sense where it's like, when you start looking at the fight sequence, and eventually after a while, it's like, okay, you can really start to see the choreography. Maybe the first time you watch something, it's like, okay, yeah, that was awesome, that was sweet. Oh my God, I want to kick ass like that too. But then by the third or fourth time, you can really see the choreography. It's like there's absolutely no reason why he would already be doing like a spin kick in this direction unless it was like the guy's timing was like 1/8 of a second too slow. But with The Matrix, to me, it was just seamless. But it was also something too where we were able to use it in the sense of, if you could, if you had trouble explaining, why you would be able to do that in the real world. And because a lot of the guys I was playing with were computer geeks, if you could explain to me through code why you would be able to do this, then bam, and it can happen. And it was just a really fun way for us to go a little bit deeper than just kick-ass action. It was playing with the sense of you are, inserted into the Matrix. So if you can describe everything in the form of coding and hacking, then then we can work with it. And it just kind of added this extra little element. But I mean, aside from which, there was like all the slow-mo and the camera rotating and agents and all this other kind of stuff. It was awesome. It was fun.
Awesome.
And then from there, I decided that it was actually what it was is that Trey Grisby, I found he did the unofficial Matrix RPG, and he had put so much kind of thought and depth into his, way more than I was able to do. So I gave up on mine based on that alone and said, okay, maybe I'm trying to bite off more than I can chew because I don't understand all this computer stuff. And then that's where Killshot came from instead.
So success anyways.
Yeah, exactly. So it worked out for the best. And like I said, Trey's version of the game, is far better than anything that I would have come up with. I was trying to just kind of go with like, the crazy wire-fu action that pretended to be smart. His was a game that's actually smart that has wire-fu action in it.
For myself, I can't tell you the number of times that I've run a game based on Yojimbo. I know that I did Sword Noir Yojimbo. I did Old School Hack Yojimbo. The Old School Hack Yojimbo actually then turned into The Walking Dead when all the dead guys started rising. But anyways, I've done D&D Yojimbo. I've done Savage Worlds Yojimbo. I've done Yojimbo set in Japan with Samurai. I've done Yojimbo set in Fantasy Worlds. It's the gift that keeps on giving. I mean, honestly, somebody can give me a set of rules, and I can guarantee you that I can replicate Yojimbo with it. No problem. It's also a really fun setup, setting people in the middle of a gang war. And again, there's literally no good guys. Unless the people that don't have the weapons, they're the only good guys, and which makes it a lot easier. If somebody has a weapon, you can kill them. It's okay, and feel good about it. Karma plus.
Just like real life.
Exactly. The only way to stop school shootings is by arming everybody.
Yes.
It's totally logical.
Totally logical.
It's the battle royale theory.
Oh man, there you go. There's got to be a role-playing game that does that as well.
I think there is a battle royale. Oh no, there's a comic.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah,
that's what it's based on.
Yeah.
But so movies, the gifts that keep on giving. What about upcoming movies that you are excited that could easily, or that you're interested in thinking about adapting to role-playing games?
I don't know whether it would be well adapted to a role-playing game, but I'm very excited about Avengers.
I think the entire world is very excited about Avengers.
Yeah.
I believe there is a role-playing game based on that.
No.
Not anymore.
Not
anymore.
Oh, it's still out there. It's just
still out there.
I'm actually playing a game of it on Friday night.
No, well, unfortunately, your books are going to disintegrate because the license is gone. So
that's right. The Vision. I'm playing The Vision.
Yeah, Cam Banks was actually, he wrote about it on Google earlier today. So like, I saw the trailer for the new Avenger movies, and I thought, I would love to be involved with a team that was working on a Marvel RPG. And then I thought, Joe.
Well, anyways, you know what? I haven't seen a lot lately that would lend itself well to the plot of, or at least not a plot necessarily, but at least lend itself well to a role-playing game. But I think the last movie I saw was Dracula Untold.
Oh, how was that?
No.
Yeah, right. That's what I expected.
That's what the review said. Yeah.
Yeah, that's all they say.
Have any of you seen The Kingsman yet?
No,
No,
I'm actually
no,
going to
not
see it
yet.
this weekend.
Oh my God, go see it.
Yes, I'm going to go see it. I think Saturday.
And so here's my problem with a lot of movies, is that they would not survive contact with the players.
Yes.
Like Kingsman is a fantastic movie, but to do that in a role-playing sense would be extremely difficult.
Well, you were saying earlier, or someone was saying earlier about, taking, how would you do that scene in a role-playing game? Well, you can't, because as soon as you try to bring it in, players are going to fuck it up. They're going to change everything, and they're going to be like, you know what? We don't want to fight. Let's just be friends. No, wait, no.
No, it's a cool scene.
No, it's this fight scene with the doors, cutting people in half.
And then the other struggle I find, like most of my role-playing game ideas usually come from books, and not entire books, but like little snippets, like a paragraph here or a chapter there.
That's as much as he can read before he's like, oh,
that's right.
Let's sleep.
On to the next one. The thing with movies that I don't know if I wouldn't say I struggle with, but where I find them to be, like, for visuals, yeah, absolutely. But storylines, a lot of movies are really work with one or two characters.
Mm-hmm.
If you throw in a whole group, they become more difficult to adapt and to keep it within the line of the storyline of the movie, because a lot of the movies, like John Wick, is very effective because it's one guy kicking ass. If you throw in a whole groups of guys kicking ass, you can still do it, but it loses the same sort of appeal that the movie has, because it's no longer one guy against the world. It's, Magnificent Seven sort of thing, or like 13th Warrior. Like, there's a lot, maybe not fewer movies, but ones that sort of constantly kind of pop out in my mind that are a group of characters working together. They usually focus on one guy or a very small group.
Yeah, or even if it is a small group, it's usually like one guy within that group, and everyone else is just kind of like going along for the ride.
Yeah, exactly.
They're sidekicks.
Right.
Yeah, well, Matrix, for instance. There's a group, but really, it's Neo.
Yeah.
And the rest are skilled in their own way, but really, it's Neo.
And I think the reason they do that is because for movies, they want the audience to emulate, or not to emulate, but to really get behind one character. You look at The Expendables, where there's 100 characters. There's still a couple. There's still like a few key characters, maybe 5 of the. I'm trying to remember how many were in the last movie, but they're all superfluous. They get one scene here. They get one scene there. They get that doesn't work so well in a role-playing game.
No.
Or at least in a traditional role-playing game. There are other role-playing games where you're not really like it's not a 1-to-1 ratio, player to character, but sort of in the normal sense, like it's 1-to-1. So that doesn't work as well. Like, here's your scene, and we'll see you 3 hours from now.
I'd say that if what you're saying is that you can only use one movie in one game, then you would be right. But that's luckily not the case at all.
No,
and in fact,
right.
you can take John Wick, you can take the Jason Statham character from The Expendables, you can take James Bond, and you can take Indiana Jones, and boom, there's your PC group.
Right, but then you're not going to be doing an Indiana Jones movie.
Well, no, but I don't do Indiana Jones movies.
That's what I'm saying is it's easy to take characters from movies and say, hey, that's my character, but it's I find it much more difficult to take a story from a movie.
Oh, no, that's ridiculous.
That's what I'm saying.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
The John Wick, let's take the John Wick story, for example, because that's what we've been talking about. It would be so easy to turn that into a group.
It would
because there's nothing about that movie that requires it to be one character.
No, and that's one where it could work, but you do a lot of these other ones, like take Killer Elite. That doesn't work very well as a group of characters.
Why not?
Because then
that works incredibly well. I mean, the main focus is Statham, but I mean, he is working as part of a team. I think it works better, at least.
He's the guy. The other team gets little scene bits here and there.
Well, I'm not saying you take the movie and you have to follow it literally. All you would do is, our very first episode was talking about James Bond, and how you would replicate James Bond is to break him up into different characters, because he's an uber character as it stands. So what you would do is you would just take all the different things that Jason Statham is good at, and each one of those would be a different character. I mean, there's nothing in the plot itself that requires it to be a single character. And I can't think of a movie that only works if it's a single character.
All I'm saying is, for me, I find it easier to grab those ideas from books, because books usually focus on a lot of characters, for the most part.
You know, something that's almost like an in-between, it's TV shows actually work better for that, because so many shows, it is actually a group of characters, and each one, like for example, if you wanted to do a Mission Impossible RPG, you wouldn't really do it on the movie so much because it's a Tom Cruise film. It's about Ethan, whatever the hell his name is.
Ethan Hunt?
Yeah,
Hawke.
sure, him too. You know, whereas if you base it off... Yeah, if you base it off the original TV show or the original 80s remake TV show, you know, it is a group of characters and each one has their own specialties. So TV shows in that sense, they actually work better because a lot of them have ensemble casts. There's still the occasional ones here or there, you know, but for the most part, I think maybe TV shows are a better way to look at as far as, like, you know, creating the group dynamic, and even then too for an extended game. You know, when you're looking to actually do a campaign, you know, those might be better examples.
I would agree that TV now, because what they've done is they've turned it into a long-form medium as opposed to an episodic medium, because in the 80s and the 70s, even the 90s, you didn't get a lot of character growth. The characters were static. What you're seeing now in movies is, yeah, you do have character growth. So if you take you use the example of Mission Impossible, there is literally no difference between the TV episodes and the movies, except the movies are a 2-hour episode, because nothing linked the various episodes. There was no ongoing story. There was no meta plot. Each one was self-contained. You could watch them in any order you wanted, which was required for syndication. It was the same thing with Star Trek. There wasn't really a lot that went from first season to second season to third season. There wasn't a lot of growth. They didn't refer back. And in some occasions, actually, I don't know if they ever did, but like in most TV series, they never referred back. So they were all, I mean, if what you're talking about is character growth or focus on characters, they kind of didn't do that because the characters were very static. Now, with, I mean, basically, I guess since Sopranos was probably the first one that did it, you do have these long-form mediums which really end up being like 13-hour movies, and because of that amount of time, you can focus on multiple characters. Even if you have one main character that is your primary focus, you have the time to develop all these other characters to make them much more interesting. I think, again, the biggest problem with movies is that it's 2 hours, and 2 hours isn't even a full game session.
No.
That's one combat in some cases.
Oh, Marvel Heroic, it's like that's half your combat. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Well, it's like the answer to the question that I was going to give about, you know, like what upcoming movie or anything, you know, would you want to base your next game on? I was just going to cheat entirely and say nothing. There's nothing out there that to me is evoking it. The one that's really on my mind that I would love to do is a Walking Dead style game. And, you know, for me, it's, you know, because it is very gritty, it's very real, it plays on that morality an awful lot, but I also like the idea, too, of your character being expendable in that, you know, characters could die on a whim with no warning or anything whatsoever for a mundane reason, and if your character is beloved and ends up being killed, then, you know, we'll maybe draw it out. So forget the character's name, but
spoiler alert.
Yeah. Okay. So, anyways, there was, you know, when the last one to die, they had kind of drawn it out over the course of a whole episode,
Right.
Very kind of heartfelt and everything like that. But then other ones where it's just like, you know, all of a sudden, bam, and they're gone just like that, with, you know, like, and you're left there with your jaw dropped on the floor.
I find those to be often more effective.
Oh, I do too, you know, because the ones where they really draw them out, you start to get the sense, there's a little bit of foreshadowing, even if you don't pick up on it right away. But that's the kind of style of game that I would love to do, is simply because, you know, for me, you know, after doing this for like 25 years, it's great when, you know, players get attached to their characters, you know, but it also at the same time too, I find not having character death sometimes, you know, it makes players a little... I guess lazy maybe is a word to put it. So I like the idea of is like, don't get attached to these characters in any way, shape, or form. Like even with my D&D campaign, I might not be serious about it, but I like to give them this impression that I'm an evil son of a bitch and I'm plotting against them the entire time. I actually cackle at the beginning of a combat sequence, and just spontaneously, we play online. I just start rolling a crap load of dice. And then, and leave them to kind of hum and haw and say like, oh, this is not going to be good, guys. This is that someone's going home in a body bag. It'll just be like, you know what, I'm going to cut that down in half. It's just 12 points of damage. I like putting that fear into them, and so I love the idea of running something where it's all about, that fear of loss, of losing your character.
Is there a
So
good
I was
zombie
gonna
RPG
cheat
out
and be. What was that?
there? Is there a good zombie RPG out there? Because I
There's
honestly don't know.
tons. All flesh must be eaten.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably like the biggest one, but there's many others. There's the new Fantasy Flight.
Which we assume will be good, but we honestly don't know until.
Well,
It's out. I just haven't played it.
Yeah.
I mean, mechanically, it's sound.
Yeah.
The thing with
Any
a zombie,
post-apocalyptic game could really just be, you just add zombies into it. I mean, I know, and hey, let's do a plug for a local Ottawa designer, Hope in Humanity, a card RPG. I mean, like that one, I'm sure you could easily just, plop on some zombies and then, do it along the same lines too. So, I'm sure that there's, loads of them out there,
oh yeah, there's probably an unofficial Walking Dead RPG as well. The thing with, I don't know if any of you have watched Z Nation.
Watch the first episode.
Yeah,
Not
it's
yet.
basically a cheesy zombie thing, but it grew on me a lot. And the one thing that I like about that show more than The Walking Dead is they are not afraid. Like, there's they've killed off some key characters in ways that were quite surprising when they did it. They didn't really draw it out. It's just like, and you're dead. It's like, holy crap. So when they actually pulled it off, it worked really, really well. Each episode is very self-contained. Like, there's sort of the overarching story of what they're doing, but basically they're just ripping off all these other zombie ideas. And it's not great in any way, but it was fun. So when I first started watching, it was like, this is ridiculous. But by the end of it, I was actually quite digging it quite a lot.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, any last thoughts on movies and RPGs? Or westerns and RPGs? Or just westerns? Because they're awesome.
Yeah. I was trying to think of actually any movies coming out that I would adapt, and I really can't. There's a lot of cool storylines, but not carte blanche, really.
I honestly, I've kind of lost track of what is coming out, to be frank, because we just don't get to go see movies, so there's no point in trying to figure out what's coming.
Mm-hmm.
But other than Avengers, yay.
Yeah,
Cool. All right.
Go see Kingsman. I'm telling you. Change your life. Hold your pants. All
Well,
right.
good
Are
night
you
from
saying
Fraser.
that we'll find Jesus by watching that movie?
You will in a church.
Ah,
The church.
Actually,
oh,
it's a guy
there's
named
always a
Jesus.
catch.
Yeah, the church scene is awesome.
I'll remember that.
Yes. So good.
Be
Anyways,
ready for it. Anyways, good night from Fraser.
Night from Rob.
good night from Chris.
Good night from Todd.
And good night. Oh, never mind.
All right.
All right.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank
Stopping
you.
the broadcast.
See you.